So what do you feel were some of the most effective elements of the instruction?
Well, I think, let me think here. I think going back, like I said, we had a few days where, I mean, with like homecoming and all that, that was kind of tough because they haven't written with like the walk yesterday, and then I had a sub Monday and Tuesday for writing time.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of like hinders sometimes. Like, do they remember kind of what we were talking about? So I knew I needed to kind of go back to those, like we're writing a watermelon seed moment versus a watermelon moment, just kind of revamping like what we've been, or like talking more again about what we've been doing for our small moment stories. So kind of going back to that our anchor chart too. And um, I do think when I pull the story out, kind of one that they can relate to, like the one, it's actually a teacher text.
Oh, okay.
But I made it up about me and my brother sledding, so it's kind of made up, but they think it's real. So then I think that part of like writing in front of them is important, so they can see like the writing structure, but then also how I'm thinking about it, using some of my like the trick ways to spell a tricky word, like doing one of those. Sometimes, again, when you're at your mini lesson, I feel like I'm trying to put too much into it, like periods, capitals, all that kind of thing. But I think when you're writing in front of it and then you're just talking that stuff out loud, that comes in the lesson.
Yeah, and
good.
I feel like that was a big thing that the kids catch on to.
Yes.
Or caught on to, and I think some of them, I could tell that when you were making that, like making your own narrative or writing that out, then they seem to be like, okay, so she's doing this, so that's how I can go approach it. Whereas there are some things out there, that they don't do that and then they just send the kid off.
Right. Well, and they do like some of the nice part I do like about that also. I've used some of the like example texts that they've given us in our writing curriculum, and it'll be a kid's name, and I'll just tell them, "Oh, this is another first grader," and it said they're from California, so they trying to make sure they relate to that like writer, but they think it's kind of cool because they're always like, "Why is it copied?" And I'm like, "Well, because that's what they gave me, so it's kind of nice for them to see." And then I've pulled those out. Like when I think taking out, having like also the children's book that's supposed to be our mentor text is helpful too. Cause like those one little ones to show them like, what do they put at the end of each of their sentences? And that's something like I hadn't been doing last year and the year before. And I would put the books up front, but then I'm like, oh, these are supposed to be our teachers. So having that book with me and like having my own writing folder with all the same things they have too, like their snap words, all that kind of thing, has been helpful. And even just like when Emerson was working on the word, I'm like, pull out your snap, your snap words folder, because I think that's kind of an important piece of them, like me just reminding them of the tools that are there for them too. So I think that's important just for myself to keep reminding myself which tools can they use when they don't need me, because most of them they're off and you're hoping they're doing what they're supposed to, because that's when you have to let go some because you're trying to conference, and so that's where sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna trust, and I will go through their folders once a week, and most of them I'm like are at least giving me some productive work, so. And the reason I kind of pulled the ones that I did today is I hadn't gotten with them as much as some of the other ones I've already gotten with for conferencing, and like Miley and Emerson I noticed in some of their writing. So that's kind of an effective part of checking in with their work, what they have. I knew they were only kind of putting one line on each page.
I was going to ask you how you had chosen those.
And so was Kian. And then I noticed with Gabriella, she was pretty much writing watermelon stories instead of watermelon seed moments, because her whole front page, that's why I didn't have her go on and read me anymore, because I noticed that one page right there was more of a watermelon seed moment, and how that's when I said to her, I bet you could have stretched this now to a few more pages, because she actually, like, she's one of my lower readers, but her writing is actually pretty good, and so for us to go back, and she really kind of took into it, and I told her just to finish that page with the periods, but then she went on to go through it. Did you notice that? Like, she went into the rest of her story and was trying to add the periods.
Oh, yeah, I did see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you wanted me to watch and see, and she was doing that.
And then I ran out of time to get back to her, though. That's the tricky part.
Yeah.
Because I told her I'd come back in and check in with her, and I just kind of ran out of time.
So then is that something that maybe you could, because I have to give suggestions in this too.
Mm-hmm.
Like with, I know Emerson and Miley, you were kind of sitting there and having them write it out after
Yep.
they said it. So could that be a time where you
Had gone back and checked in.
gone
Yeah.
in and checked
Yeah.
in and then
And
really
see,
quit going
I had like 2 goals for that. I wanted to see, because Emerson was really stretching words out that didn't completely make sense, but she knew what they said. So I was trying to watch her to see how she was stretching out some words. Like bucket, she did pretty good with those, but like splash was like pat or it didn't really make sense. So I was kind of trying to watch that. But again, my focus was for her to more stretch out into steps, and so I didn't want to get too focused on how she's stretching out words, because that's a bad thing I get into. I'm like all of a sudden putting out all these little fires, and then I'm like, wait, what was the focus of my conference with this child? You know what I mean? You know, so then I was like, nope, my focus is in her stretching out of words right now. It's stretching out her story into like, what more detail could I get from her? Yeah.
I think that will help to like doing that like in future lessons, because then they're not like, oh, I have to worry about this now and that now. So
and it is trickier with that group, like with Jen's group, because we do seem to tend to have a little bit more time at writing. I felt like I was able to get back to the conference of a couple of those kids, where in the afternoons I feel like, you know, and you get those little behaviors that came up, you know, that you had to put the little fire out over here because he's not on task, or this stapler ran out of the staple, so that would help. Because here I tell you yesterday, I'm like, it's been nice to have the stapler. They can do it on their own. And then
not prepared today.
I know, and my staples were right there, but I kind of was like, they're getting so stuck. So we might have to have a whole staple conversation too at some point, you know. Yeah. So.
What is the element you thought? Oh, I think I'm looking at the wrong list. So you're supposed to reflect on these. What is the element you thought should be shared with other teachers within the grade level or content?
I definitely think, like, since I'm the only one teaching writing, Jen and I, like when she's teaching math too, we've had to have a time to share. But I think one thing that I noticed about writing last year that I've been reflecting on more with her this year is definitely making sure we're both in the alignment with our phonics unit, because that's super important when I'm like looking at how they're stretching out words.
Okay.
And so I think sometimes when I'm noticing maybe they're missing some of the like blends right now, because we've really been hitting those hard, like, are we both on the same page with the way we're teaching that, or does that child need more time? Also, like with Jen, they'll do some writing, you know, at Reader's Workshop and stuff. And so sometimes I shared with Jen our tricky ways that we worked on earlier in the unit, ways to spell tricky words. So when I put that little anchor chart up on the board, I gave her a copy. And so she knew that I want them, like when they're even stretching out words with their writing journals and stuff like that, when they're not writing, she knows that. And then I also gave her our handwriting that we're using, because there's a handwriting pathways. So like if a letter is coming up that's not working for them very well, or they're not writing really well, then we'll follow the verbiage of the writing pathways. And actually we ended up doing that with kindergarten too. We've aligned more with like what wording are we using when we're teaching letters, because a big thing for these guys is like Abriella, she was able to read most of it, but then you come back to some of the words you don't know. And so can they read their writing back to themselves? Because that's an important part of writing. So Jen and I will talk probably more about writing with the reading time, just so she kind of knows where they're at, but also like, no, we're not using capitals in the middle of words right now. Like we've been talking about that. So please make sure when they're doing their reading, or science even, like when they're writing about their science, that, you know, we're really talking about that too. And then some of the mentor texts I have, I'll kind of tell her what mentor texts I'm using, because the kids will talk about that sometimes with her. So I think that's been important. Some of the anchor charts that we've been doing, I've been sharing with her. So
yeah, and I think that's good too, because I know there's some things that I've experienced, like that Molly may be doing with her students, or that I'm doing with her students in writing, and I need to share that with her. So that is something good to do. How would you change the lesson for future instruction?
I don't know. I kind of revamped it as I was in the middle of it anyway, because so when I was kind of looking over what I had planned, I realized that we hadn't really done the teacher demonstration text yet to finish it out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they're so into this. Like thing about my brother and me sledding and me crashing into the tree, which is kind of true. I did have that problem when I was little. I just amped it up a little bit to make it more interesting. That I knew they would participate a lot more because they were bought into it. So I switched it even actually in the middle of Renner's group because I was like, you know what, I did that one little blurb on the front, or the one little, like, I went to school, I did that, but I think that was good. And I didn't really have a plan for sharing at first. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this worked out perfectly with what Emerson was doing.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I'm going to have her share. And that's usually when I end up sharing. Like, I'll plan for some kids, but I really don't plan for sharing until it's like during my conferencing, if a child has done something. And she was able to add that, which was perfect for the step-by-step, Because
if you're not able to, like, if you have kids picked, but they're not doing what you're wanting to share with, then it may get the kids confused.
It is. And that's where I try to find something, because I want them eventually all to share, but that's, again, with the limited time with this last group, I feel like we run out of the share time. And I was kind of watching the clock, and I'm like, you know what, this could be a simple short share, but this is really important for her to share out, because she has sometimes that confidence helped her. But that was kind of like, and they had all been, I knew most of them had been the falls. So I'm like, well, now all the fun things that are there, but what was the really fun thing that you thought was fun about it, So I think that's actually probably what I changed, is because I changed it right in the middle of using the teacher text of writing right before I started, and then in the middle of the lesson putting Emerson in there. So I feel like I kind of made the changes as I went. As far as looking back now, my mini lesson got a little bit long again, and I was really trying to watch. It's like I always add something else in there, and I'm like, I need to stop adding the little extras. Just stop it. So I'd say I just want to be more aware of that, making sure the mini lesson is mini. And it wasn't super long, but it was still just, I could have probably left a couple things out of there. So.
And have you tried maybe like setting a timer?
Yes. And I should just put it in there, but the problem I've noticed with the timer, when I set it, if it goes off there like, you're done, and I'm like, but I'm not done. I need like 2 more minutes.
So that you could even like, because do they learn how to tell time in first grade?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, towards the end of the years when they really focus on it, but I could have a timekeeper.
You could. That's what I was going to suggest, because I have always had someone who's like, okay, when the big hand's on 5, that's when I need to be done, or you need to be like, hey, you need to wrap it up.
Yeah.
And then if I'm missing anything, I'll pull you back and talk to you and stuff like that too.
Yeah, so that would work too. Yeah, because that was a goal. And I told them that was a thing that I was working on this year. I mean, I called myself out. I said, I'm really trying, because again, it's like after so long, they're done listening to you anyway, And it's like the ones that are still listening kind of already get what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're just like, okay, move on.
I need to let them write.
What would you like to improve in the instructional techniques?
I would say, besides the just being more aware of the time limit on the mini lesson, again, because of the attention span of first graders, would still be my technique for taking better notes and how to utilize those notes better. Like when I'm conferencing.
Okay.
Like I feel like I'm taking notes to take notes because that's what I'm supposed to do. But sometimes I'm like, I don't always go back to my notes. And my purpose for writing my notes is to start to pull more strategy groups. But I haven't been doing it that way. So that would probably be my instructional technique. I may be able to get to smaller groups versus one-on-one. Because now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, I asked Miley, Kian, and Emerson to add more detail. Well, I could have had them probably all read. Then I probably could have been like, okay, now I want you guys to think about what's another sentence you could add in there. But like with Miley, it was nice to say, what color's your toothbrush? To get her thinking, kind of like now, like coaching her kind of into thinking more about what her bed, because at first I was like, oh, hers kind of looks like it might be a how-to.
Yeah.
Versus, yes.
Small moment,
yeah. But then I'm like, well, she does do her bedtime routine every night. So, but then I had like earlier in Jen's class, the one little girl I was conferencing with, she's had a few stories that were pretty good. Today it was like all sight words. I'm like, what are we writing? I'm just writing all my snap words. And I'm like, well, how does that work with your small moment? So It is funny how you catch them. And I mean, she had probably like 10 or 15 words and you're like, yep, okay, I'm just going to go with this. That's just what it is. But I said, we're going to stop this one. I said, now you'll know which ones to use, but we need to get back to your small moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say the conferencing and then maybe better ways to use it for strategy grouping. So maybe I could get to more. Or even helping coach the kids better to coach each other. Like they'll share their writing. And I know it takes time and practice, and I'm sure fourth graders still need it too, but could I coach them a little bit better to like we do talk about, especially in Reader's Workshop, you know, when we're working with a reading partner, how to ask questions. And then we did talk earlier in the lesson too, like, do I have a where is my story taking place? Like, who's in my story? Like, having them, maybe they have a little sheet that let me ask you these questions to the writer.
That's what I use for my kids, is I have like sentence prompts that they use, or they take turns and they use timers sometimes because they'll get distracted like any kids. Yeah. But then that's what I was going to suggest, is like, you have the kids in your small group and you're conferencing with each one, but could you have it so that like maybe it's like Kian and Miley, or if Miley's doing like adding the detail, then maybe she could go to Aubriella, because Aubriella was doing the stop
good with names
as well. I'll try.
Yeah. Well, and I do that at Reader's Workshop, so it's like I could do that at Writer's Workshop too. You know, like we're going to work on this strategy at Reader's Workshop. You two, you're going to work, or like sharing out. Like you two are going to share out, and you two, and they have writing partners, the people, you know. But I do kind of have them spread out, and so there are usually 2 days a week. I try to have them, you know, after so long, I do set a timer for the quiet time, and then I let them go off and like, if you need your writing partner now, or I'll stop them and say, okay, we're getting with our writing partner now. But they do, I can tell, need to be more effective. Like some of them are pretty good at it. And then I tend to feel like I put some of the kids, the higher kids with the lower kids, so they can kind of help. But then I'm like, you know, I do want them to kind of be like able to be in with kids that are writing like them too, because I might push those writers better.
Push them, but then it's also that they're gonna, I think it helps too with their confidence level. Like, okay, I'm not as low, or like, oh, I have to be like this student or something.
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, and I just, again, they need some time and practice, and I just need to give it that some time into, maybe that might just be a mini lesson a couple times, you know? So, yeah.
So your responsiveness to the diversity of students, I feel like, I mean, we don't have a lot of as far as culture differences, but as far as like to the gender too, you pulled 3 girls and a boy, but also during like the mini lesson and stuff, you did a nice job of like calling on a variety of students and making sure you noticed the students who were being like the model students, or just giving friendly reminders to the friends instead of being like, Noah, you need to stop doing that or something. So. Yeah.
Well, I've got a couple that I have visual cues with, you know, so they know. Like the one was playing with the slap bracelet, and I just went like that, and he knew right away, because he's like, oh, she's gonna make me build that in my locker. And then even like, you know, like my one that, well, and I don't know if you noticed, but I have that little guy that sits, you know, like in Good Body Basics, we call him Ricky Respectful. We're sitting like Ricky Respectful right now, and I tapped it a couple times because a couple of the kids just need that reminder, like, you know, like, yeah. It did help, though. I did prompt them a little bit that we're having a writing guest. And she's going to go share with her fourth graders. You know how we all threaten them when we have a writing guest coming today, so show them your best work.
Do your best.
Yeah.
Successes of your lesson. I feel like the kids were really engaged when you were writing about the snow thing.
Yes, they love that. They love it.
They do.
They just love the whole story. They enjoy hearing their teacher talk about when the teacher is little. I notice those are the times they're really engaged. But then really when I'm trying to write, I want them to help me spelling the words. Yeah. Trying to keep them from just sitting there like, what is she, you know, and like, you know, just talking verbally to them and making sure I'm like making eye contact with them and everything too. But I felt like the 4 that were actually for my conference at my table, I'm like, I really felt like the things they were kind of focusing on, they went to it with it, you know? So Miley, a little bit more like, I kind of debated about having her start over, and I'm like, no, we're just going to roll with this. Like, give me a little bit more detail about it,
Which
so
I think it's good to do because it with some students, if you like want them to stretch it, but it's like, okay, that's not the way we're supposed to stretch it, but going in their direction still aligned with what they need.
I think we have to be careful, especially at a young age too, that they will maybe like shut down then, like, oh, I did something wrong now, and I do feel like I said, I'll use my mindset wall, but I don't feel like with this group I've had to use that as much. Like they will, I mean, mostly looking out, you'd still see some kids kind of, but a lot of them were writing. Like you could see their pencils moving and, them doing things too. So I think that was helpful. But I just felt like the overall mini lesson went well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I feel it was really good, especially like you said, you hadn't really been together since last week. But I think it was really good to keep referring back to, because I've seen that with some teachers in the past where they have not referred back to other strategies to show how it all goes together, whereas then the kids are thinking, oh, this is something completely different I have to do. It does nothing with what I've been working
Well, that's like the touching and tapping with their pencil erasers and trying to plan out before they write. Like Emerson wanted to pick up her pencil and write right away, and I said, remember, we're trying, and that was in a previous lesson, trying to think about what I want to write before I start writing it. And so that was another important piece that I wanted to make sure. And then she started to read, and I said, oh, what do we need to use right now? Because we're reading her group level right now, still kind of uses their pointer power, we call it, with reading, because they're at those books where they skip a lot of words because they're not focusing. And we are trying to scoop up more words as we learn to read more fluently, but she's still kind of at that stage. So I want her to read her writing like a reader, like she would her reading books. So that was important too. So.
Important theories that were evident in your classroom organization, grouping, configurations, motivation, and instruction.
Well, I would say important theories. Well, the grouping for sure, where they're kind of off on their own, this is definitely, like I said, in 16 years, this is probably the chattiest group I've had in a while. And they are just a lot more productive when I just have quiet music and just flat out say quiet time.
I feel like the quiet music definitely was a trigger, or
beep 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 beep.
Yes,
that's my little cue.
Awesome.
Beep beep, and they know I'm going to give an important direction. That was just I thought of that like 2 years ago, and I still use it. And then they'll put their big ear on.
You can definitely tell, and they you can tell that they've practiced and they know the routine on the carpet is this, where to go and get your stuff so that we don't have to bother Mrs. Cheeseman all the time.
And still and that's the hard part, because there are some that want to just come and read to, or they want to ask you a question or make sure they're doing something right. But you can even see, like, we do the bathroom signals now and the drink, and that way they don't even have to say my name. They could just walk by and I'm like, back at them, and that's been helpful too. I didn't used to do that as much, and Jen was using it for a while, Mrs. Renner, and so I was like, oh my gosh, I love that. Like, that just helps. So staples, maybe I need a staple, I need a staple filler. There I go. But yeah, and just the people they're sitting by are kind of more writing like they are. So I've kind of configured them that way. Okay. Reading and writing even. They're all kind of about the same. Most of them that are reading are about the same level of writing as well. Except for Abriella. I will say she is in title, and yet her writing is pretty darn good, which is exciting to see.
Could you have it maybe because I know you said twice a week you try to at least do the peer partners. That way they're not coming to you and confirming I'm doing this right.
Right.
I've tried something called 3 Before Me.
I do that too.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that could be something, or even. Yeah.
They're really good at it about reading time, because that's when I use it for Reader's Workshop more. But that's where the hindrance of the timer, I can tell, is hindering them a little, because they have a writing partner they're supposed to ask.
Oh, okay.
So right now it's more where we've talked about where when the timer's on, and I didn't set a timer today, I just wanted them to write because we hadn't been writing for a couple days, that I'm like, they just need to write today and not worry about. Where I do, Cash was asking his writing partner if he could borrow something, and then I was like, Cash, and he's like, well, I was asking my writing, and so that's where I'm like, I need to kind of think about that a little bit and be a little bit more flexible. If I can trust you to ask a writing question even when it's quiet work time, but there are some times where I'm like, I don't want you to use a writing partner right now, because you just need to trust that what you're doing is okay.
Yeah.
And that's another thing
and
too. Yeah.
And that's probably good when you do have just set days.
Yes.
After I think about it, because then they're learning to trust their own instinct.
Well, I usually am better when we've more during the week about, I set the timer for 10 to 12 minutes. And then when that timer goes off, they know that's when they can talk a little, go talk to their talking part, and they really don't get very loud after that. Some of them just keep writing. And then you have kids that go over to their writing partner. Today I just didn't, because I'm like I said, we just hadn't been writing very effectively since Thursday because of the subs and the things coming up. So I'm like, they just need time to write today. So I didn't want to set it and, do that. So
It is 4:15.
that's okay. I just got to get Molly to grandma's in like 10 minutes. So they canceled soccer because of the rain. Or
Muddiness.
Molly's helping make a cake though. So
Ooh, fancy. Next, so assessment information, you gathered that, I think, like from your notes and stuff, and we kind of talked about already how to use that. So then how are you thinking that maybe you could use your notes that you gathered today from those 4?
Well, I definitely think just watching them, and again, today was the first part of making sure you have little details in there. But as we're getting ready to start our final, which will be here in the next, starting next week, because we're going to get ready to it's time to move on. I can tell they've all been writing quite a few stories that we're going to do a final. And the final piece is one thing I'm going to remind them. Remember how Emerson had the one sentence, part of and we've used a checklist. So I've showed them a checklist. Part of our checklist is adding the details in there. So that's going to be something the next couple days I keep kind of stressing to them. Are we stretching it out? Because there are a lot of pieces to this, stretching it out. But so I don't want to get too focused now on the planning out and all that. I do want them to keep doing that, but I want to get focused on to make a good writing piece means, I've stretched out my story. I've given some detail. I've told one watermelon seed moment, not a watermelon. So those most important pieces I can tell tomorrow and in the next few days starting next week is what I need to kind of look at. What are the most important pieces of that for a good final piece now? Sure. I mean, I'm hoping they'll put the parts of stretching words out and all that together too. But I think I just need to know what's the main focus for them is what I think I need to do.
Yeah. On that. And then technology, use the Itsy Bitsy Spider. I thought it was cute when the kids were doing it with you.
Well, and that was more like, yes, we stretched it to the slideshow, but now we're making an itty bitty, like the Itsy Bitsy Spider. We're taking Itsy Bitsy.
But I think that helped them though, having it stretched out and seeing it, because usually when you sing the song, it's one whole thing.
It is,
And a couple kids, you could be like, oh, we don't just keep going.
Well, and did you notice how they read it along instead of, most of them didn't sing. A couple I could tell wanted, but they're so used to singing it that they were, and a lot of people will say you should do poems and nursery rhymes and stuff in your reading time because if they can't sing it, then it helps them learn those. To read it. Yep. Right. Yeah. So
I think maybe the only suggestion with that, or question, I guess, do you find it that your kids struggle to see what you're writing because it's on the board?
Yes, and that's the other piece of technology I try to use.
Your document.
I did, and it will half the time it works and it won't. I had it ready to go, and for runners it kind of kept quitting, and so I was like, I'm just going to have to write on the board. But I usually write in a black marker, and I don't know why I chose the pencil today.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, I was looking at that again, and I'm like, I did not use my black marker. So that definitely is, yes.
Makes a difference.
Yeah, or I'll use, I have the big magnet that goes onto my easel with the writing line, so I'll use that too. Yeah, because I even heard somebody say, oh, it's kind of hard to see, and I'm like, well, yeah, it is, because it's in pencil.
But, I mean, at the same time, that did kind of keep them, more
focused,
because, okay, what exactly is she writing? So,
yes, yeah.
And I think that is it.
Okay. Yay.